Hi, I'm Katherine Kovacic and I'm an author. My latest book is Seven Sisters, out now with HarperCollins. It is about a group of women who meet through a therapy session, trauma counselling. Each of the women has lost a sister to domestic violence, and in each case, there was no real justice. Either the perpetrator got away with it completely or received a sentence so light that it was insulting and laughable. So the women are not only grieving, they're angry, and they come up with a plan to redress the balance by taking out the perpetrators in a way that the woman who is connected to the case has an alibi, and the woman who carries out the hit, shall we say, has absolutely no connection to anything at all. So that's where we start, and then we go on from there. How is Seven Sisters different? Well, from everything I've written before, it's very different. It's much more a thriller, whereas the crime fiction that I've written before is more in a cosy crime sort of vein, with Alex Clayton, my art sleuth. And yes, I think that's it in a nutshell. This is a thriller, and it's more of a standalone, I think. Right. So the three themes, I think. Domestic violence was the real spark that inspired this story. I had a short story a number of years ago that drew on that theme, and it stayed in my head. I thought it was a much bigger subject than the short story allowed, but I didn't quite know what to do with it. And then I was doing some other research, and I was looking at astronomy and myths to do with the stars, and I reread the myth of the Pleiades, which deals with the star cluster known as the Seven Sisters, who are women who have been turned into stars, so had their lives destroyed because a man is after them, and that's the star Orion, or the star group Orion. And it's a myth that is over 100,000 years old, which is both disturbing and interesting, but disturbing because we're 100,000 years on and we still have men coming after women and thinking that we make women safe by destroying their lives, making them, the problem. So that sort of was the spark that then gelled with the whole idea of domestic violence and brought the story together for me. The detective comes in quite late. Was there a specific reason? Well, yes and no. That was where her story intersected with that of the other women. So it was the right point to bring her in, because this is not a police procedural, and I didn't want the readers to sit with the police side of things. I really wanted the readers to be with the women and to go on that ride. So that was just where she had to be, I think, in the story. Researching multiple murders for a book, and murders that have to look like accidents or suicide, well, how much was in my head? I guess there's a lot of ideas in my head, but I had to research how many of them were viable, and that the women could conceivably get away with without, stretching the bounds of probability too much. So there are a lot of ideas that were in my head that, when I researched them, just did not pan out, or they would have just left, evidence everywhere and made it too obvious, or just that crimes were being committed. So some research went into figuring out things they could get away with. And of course, because these are, to a certain degree, normal women with a normal skill set. They're not women who suddenly find that they can, fight off a man with one hand, disarm him, get the weapon, hotwire a boat, drive it across Sydney Harbour at full throttle with one hand while shooting out the back with the other. That's not the kind of people they are. So it had to fall into those sort of bounds of probability. But having that sort of veterinary background, I have a very high gore tolerance too. So I could deep dive into all the scientific articles about if a body has been in the water for 2 weeks, can we do toxicology on the remaining tissue, and what will we find, with graphic pictures, included? So there was that kind of research going on in the background, but then there were the story ideas that I had in my head that just didn't work out. And then there was the fun stuff that I thought, oh, that would be so cool if I could do that, but it just didn't work. There was one scientific paper can't remember the journal, it was like trauma, accident and injury, and it was injuries and fatalities due to falling coconuts. I thought, cool idea. Don't think it's really going to wash though. Putting a dog in the story, I don't think it's a trademark, but I wanted the dog there, first of all, to show that human side of the character, because at that point she's just killed someone and then she's off to rescue the dog effectively. So that shows that also the morality and that sort of play in her head. But also because I wanted the dog there because, again, the veterinary background, animals get hurt in domestic violence situations too. And we see that as vets. We see broken bones from animals that have been kicked. We see cigarette burns, and it's a difficult position for the vets to be in too, to know how far they should step into this situation. Technically, your first duty is to the animal, but if you know how those injuries have been caused, how far can you go there? So I wanted the dog there because of their position in the domestic violence, and also for that character to balance out her actions. I think it had to be done with a light touch for the book because it is a subject that people are inclined to look away from, and to go in there too heavily and to put it too much in people's faces, I think it's people don't want to look at it. People don't want to see that reality. It's a bit frightening because it is such an epidemic in society. You know, it's in Australia, on average, 1 woman a week is being killed by a current or former partner. So I wanted that in there, but I wanted people to be in a position where they could look at it, I don't want to say with a more objective eye, but where they could look at it and not have to look away and think about it. Trends in publishing. No, I do not pay attention to trends in publishing, whether it's, you know, Outback Noir or Cozy. I have characters and stories in my head, and they just say they need to be written. So the thing I'm sort of working on at the moment, I've had this character in my head for some time. I think it's a bit like having the job interview situation where you have a waiting room full of people and you bring them in and you sort of ask them all those really annoying psychological questions. So like, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses and what can you bring to the story? And you see who's got the best thing to present at that time. And my current sort of protagonist he's been in the waiting room for a bit and he's been getting a bit impatient, I have to say. Social media profiles for authors. Wow. It's the ultimate double-edged sword because I think you have to do that these days. You have to have some sort of profile, but it does feel like a time sink that you think I could be writing instead of posting about it. And it's sort of like the modern philosophical question, you know, when a tree falls in a forest? It's if an event happens and no one posts about it on social media, did it really happen and were we even there? And does anyone really care? Because that's the other side of social media. Very often you feel like you're presenting or shouting into an echo chamber of like-minded people, and are you really reaching anybody else? But it has to be done. It's part of modern marketing. I think I probably wrote the first draft in about 6 months, and then I took another couple of months of polishing, and then when we went to the publisher, it was probably another 10 months of backwards and forwards with editing. So a couple of years all up. Will Fiona Ulbricht return? Interesting. I had always envisaged this book as a standalone book, but Detective Ulbricht came through really strongly. So I think she's got the potential for more, but I don't think it would be related. It's not going to be a follow-on to Seven Sisters. It might be perhaps more of a prequel that brought her where she is in the narrative, or otherwise I'd have to take her off in a different direction. She's a great character. I really enjoyed writing her and I enjoyed being with her. So she's the character that I could potentially see doing more with from this book. Alex Clayton's still in the background. There's some stuff going on with her, but I have a new protagonist that I'm working with. Set in Australia. I'm probably about halfway through the sort of draft at the moment, which is, you know, where it's just kind of all coming out, and I have bits where I think I just want to, and I'm just writing forward with the story at the moment. I'm happy with where he's going at the moment. So that's there, and a non-fiction with the National Library dog book, which is based on their collection, photographic primarily because they have a wonderful historical photographic collection. So Australia's Dogs, which will be coming out later this year. But yes, just sort of exploring crazy crimes in my head. I read lots, Katie. I love to read. So I have to, if I'm in the middle of a story, I direct my reading in another direction. So I don't tend to read crime when I'm writing crime. So I'll go and do history or biography or something like that, or I'll do research for what I think might be the next project, which is really kind of weird but when it's sort of straight up, you know, just details, it's easy to read that sort of stuff, even though your head's in another story. Recent books, top of my TBR pile at the moment is Paul Delgano's A Country of Eternal Light, which I haven't got to yet, but I can feel it pulling me. So I'm really excited about that. Later in the year, Wifedom by Anna Funder, which is Eileen O'Shaughnessy, so George Orwell's wife biography. So I'm really, really excited about getting my mitts on that one. Thank you, Katie and David. Thank you, Leith, for having me again. It's always lovely to talk to you.